On today's show, the Bucks sent a little bit of a scare through the fan base up until the fourth quarter, but they managed to close out the game. No Giannis and no Jrue Holiday in this one, but they still had 4 20-plus point scorers in the game, which is very nice. Khris Middleton, a season-high 34, and Javon Carter. Is this the day? Is today the first day that we start a podcast talking about Javon Carter? Stick around to find out. That is what we call a cliffhanger to start the show.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday, and also for my work at ESPN alongside me, the founder of brewhoop.com and longtime voice of the podcast, Frank Madden. As always, we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or listen of every single day. On YouTube, on the Old School podcast. It all helps us, and we really appreciate it. And we like it, especially when you get involved. So if you haven't subscribed or liked or followed or dropped a comment or a review, please go do that because it's free to do, and it helps us and keeps this show rolling along, in our opinion, in our humble opinion, keeps this show rolling along very nicely. So we are getting close to the postseason. The Bucks pick up this win against the Pistons, 126-117. There was no Giannis. There was no Jrue. And it had the real makings of being a game that absolutely left you really pissed off and disappointed with a loss against the worst team in the league, who had their own significant absences in this one, Frank. But it is another hat tip to the depth. There's no doubt about that. To be able to get 4 20-plus point scorers. I mentioned Khris, and Jevon Carter was, maybe the guy that kept this team ticking along early in the fourth quarter. Where do you want to start? Do you want to start with Jevon Carter and his three-point shooting in this game? I'll throw it to you, but it was a pretty nice performance.
So it's funny. I wasn't watching I was watching this game probably like 30 minutes behind on DVR, and had to do family dinner. Always do family dinner. Don't like to have the game on in the background.
Early start.
Yes. So I just kind of was watching a little bit, paused it, had my dinner, and then was kind of trying to play catch up. And which I do often. That's part of the reason why I don't necessarily tweet a whole lot during games. But it's funny. I did not realize until I looked at the box score right after that Javon was 6 of 7 from 3-point range, because I also remember him just like missing a ton of mid-range shots. I think he was 2 for 8 on twos and 6 for 7 on threes. And I looked it up again after the game because I always had this feeling of, man, Javon just feels like he is just absolutely automatic on spot up shots and on pull ups, even though, he's had these runs of hitting these pull up threes in transition, which again, that's not the only form of a pull up jump shot. Obviously we normally they're, in half court, but it feels like, I feel like he has gotten a bit trigger happy with those, but I was surprised. I was looking at, I think it's 3-point splits. It was still like 43% on spot up and like 39% on pull-ups, which, both those numbers are terrific. And so it just speaks to the fact that his, again, the consistency all year has been pretty remarkable, right? I mean, he had kind of in the middle, a little bit of a dip, but, his spot up 3-point shooting has been such a great weapon for the Bucks, and obviously just been really important for him and a key part of how he has carved out a role, given the fact that he's not, a natural, pick and roll point guard. He's not a playmaker. The more he dribbles, kind of like the worse the Bucks half court offense looks. But when he's just kind of making quick decisions and taking those quick spot up threes, especially from the corners, he's obviously just been really valuable. And so, I think whenever you have these games where you're missing key guys, obviously tonight, Jrue and Giannis sitting out, you're going to need, we first look at Khris and Brook, right? Those are the two remaining pieces of the core four. It's not like Brook Lopez scoring 20 points as he did again tonight is anything new. It's not like it's anything that we, are shocked to see Khris Middleton do at this point, even coming back from the injury. But still, both those guys delivered at certainly the high end of what we'd expect from them. And then for Javon to be kind of like the outlier guy in terms of bringing, a real big scoring performance, that was obviously really big. In a game that, certainly more of an offensive showcase than a defensive one. Neither team shot that well from three, but with the fouling and I would say in general, right? Like this felt like a game where, we were not seeing kind of peak Bucks defensive intensity throughout this game. Probably a lot more fouling than Bud would like to have seen.
Yes.
And but I think that the other piece talking about Khris and Brook, I thought the thing that I really liked with Khris today, again, ironically, it seems like his 3-point shooting is just like feast or famine, and I think it's encouraging that he can have a season high in which he 1 for 7, I think, from 3 tonight. I think he had 8 points, 8 rebounds, 5 assists. But I think he was 12 out of 16 on 2-point shots and got to the rim a little bit, got to some of those floater range shots a little bit. And then just the kind of mid-range game was, I'd say vintage Khris Middleton, whether it was from the post, whether it was attacking off the dribble. And I just thought I really liked his pace. And by that, I mean, he was really, when he was getting the ball, really looking to attack and push and not slow the game down. And, again, we don't think of Khris as like, he's not like some end-to-end type scorer typically, but he really looked aggressive and felt confident kind of just getting to his spots all night long. And obviously this was a game where they really needed that creation because with Jrue out, and Javon starting, you don't have a natural playmaker in the starting 5 at the point guard spot. So yeah, good time for a, decade late revenge, not decade late, but 10 years on, Khris Middleton still dishing out some revenge games against the Detroit Pistons, which is nice to see. And, we're at that point of the season. I mean, the lead now over the Celtics, only 2 games, this big game on a back-to-back coming up later this week against Boston. And, again, you kind of easy to take this game for granted, but we saw last week, you're going to kind of take these sorts of games for granted against these teams that are not really looking like they are obviously contenders. Detroit, obviously well off the pace of Indiana, but still Indiana at home, without Tyrese Halliburton, I still look at that game and like, man, that you got to do better in games like that. They get another chance to take it to the Pacers on Wednesday on the first night of that back-to-back. But, again, no one's going to look back on this game and think of it as like some huge win, and certainly was not as convincing as you would have liked. But, with fewer guys, missing 2 All-Stars, again, Detroit was missing a bunch of guys as well. But we saw Jaden Ivey, some of the young guys, Duran, they've got talent, right? They can be frisky, and they've got nothing to lose right now. So, again, a great win it was not, but a solid win to kind of take care of business and keep the gears moving here on the road to hopefully a number 1 seed. Again, not many games left and not a whole lot of margin of error. So important win to grind out here given the circumstances.
Yeah, Bud was asked about the free throws for the Pistons, and coming into this game, even without Giannis, if you had told me the Bucks were going to be -10 on free throw attempts despite getting up 26 of their own, I would have raised my eyebrows and thought that does not sound right. And Bud was asked the question that kind of went along the lines of, what makes it hard about this? What is difficult about the way this Pistons team can get to the free throw line? And Bud responded how I thought he was going to respond. He was pretty disgusted, I think, with his own team's defensive stuff. He said it was a point of emphasis coming in. So, yeah, that was clearly something he wasn't going to be happy about. And also just the last little note on Javon Carter. I mean, I think a couple of those shots, he went through a period. So he missed the dunk early in this game. And then I think, he got up a couple of quick shots. I think he was looking to redeem himself with a missed dunk that didn't quite work out there. But 6 for 7. And if he didn't shoot that well from 3, no one else was hitting him because the rest of the team was 8 for 37 from 3. So thank goodness for Javon, because a couple of those big ones from the corner early in the fourth quarter when, the Pistons team just wouldn't go away there at all, which was at least looming as being a frustration point for this game. I've got some Brook Lopez trivia for you coming up when it comes to his scoring, because you pointed to the fact that he had another 20-point game. We are now getting used to it based on what we've seen over the last 6 weeks. This isn't exactly something that's been commonplace over his last few years with the Bucks, though. So I'm going to get to Brook Lopez trivia in just a second after I talk about FanDuel, because the NCAA tournaments have well and truly heated up, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now FanDuel is giving new customers a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets. If your first bet doesn't win, just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today to claim your no-sweat first bet. I thought I'd pull up the 6th man of the year odds. There was a bit of conversation on the Bucks feed Some of us like to respect the local announcers and we're watching the local feed, but some of us are really into the Pistons feed, like Frank. But they were talking about six man, and I think Bobby Portis. Frank's on mute, but he's trying to make a rebuttal right now, and I'm not having any of it.
I always listen to Lisa and Marcus, and tonight's case it was Steve and Zora as well. Yes. No, I'm always loyal to the Bally Sports feed.
Absolutely. But they weren't talking about the fact that Bobby was, I think maybe there was a little bit of campaigning going on, or something was brought up about him as six man. So six man of the year, Emmanuel quickly right now, the favorite at minus 195, which feels like it's just been a thing that's happened the last few games. But anyway, Malcolm Brogdon's right there at plus 150. And then Bobby Portis, third favorite, plus 4,600. So some value there if that's what you're interested in with Bobby. Another double-double tonight for him. Gamble responsibly. But then you get also safe and secure and super easy to use. So go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. And don't miss your shot at a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Make every moment more with FanDuel. So Brook Lopez, 24 points, 14 rebounds, got you a couple of blocks as well. And again, played big minutes, played 35 minutes in this one with Myers Leonard. I guess he's still just not available. He hasn't been available for a while now. They obviously signed him for the rest of the season, but he was 8 for 11 from 2. He only attempted 1 3. And again, it was one of those nights where even when he had the ball on the perimeter, when the Bucks were kind of in this back and forth, I was thinking, just put the ball on the floor and slowly charge your way to the basket. They literally cannot do anything to stop you. And he has just been dominating games this way. Before we get into that, though, so he has now had 22 games this season of 20 plus points, which that's a lot.
Yeah.
How many do you reckon he had? And I can't go the full Buddy era because it's not quite as impressive, but the last 3 seasons combined, 20 plus point games.
I will say 16.
Yeah, that's not a bad guess. 23. So essentially he's 1 20 plus point game away from equaling what he's done over the last 3 seasons. And again, we've seen it more. We even saw for Brook Lopez, it was a pretty graceful soaring through the air lob finish from Joe Ingles as well. I mean, we just keep on saying it, but he just looks awesome. And when the Bucks needed points tonight, he was the easy guy to get to. In addition to the fact that he had those 5 offensive rebounds, some of them came at really important times. And he even had that one where he was like flat-footed, just one hand in the air. He's like, I'm just going to grab this rebound and put it back in the basket. He's just awesome, Frank.
Yeah, I mean, a year ago too. Well, a year ago, obviously he didn't play most of the year, but I think in previous years, Brooks stepping up with a 24 and 14 night on only 11 shots probably would have been like, way more of a headline for us this year. It's like, well, he's averaging over 20 points a game in the month of March, right? I mean, we've kind of become somewhat numb to it, but it's funny because the story, there's so much, people have gotten so used to restating like Brook Lopez, he's transformed his game, blah, blah, blah. And, I think obviously the 3-point percentage this year being a career high has been really helpful. Obviously it's still an important weapon for him. It's not like he's, stopped shooting threes or something like that, but I think we've seen it for a couple of years now. He has, rediscovered, I'd say, more balance to his game. And, just the variety of ways that he can score. I mean, he hit that crazy, like he was blanketed. I think the shot clock was running down, and he dusts out like a step back, like 20-footer with the guy's hand in his face and just bottoms that. I mean, the touch he has, from different angles on the move, one-handed push shots, normal jump shots, step backs, all that stuff. I mean, he takes shots sometimes, especially out of the post, where it's just like, man, that's a bad shot. But when you've got touch like that, suddenly these shots become pretty good ones. I also really enjoyed the pocket pass Ingles gave him on the now signature Joe and Brook Jolo. I don't know, what do you want to call the Joe Ingles and Brook Lopez pick and roll? That literally came to me in Longle. No, that's
Pringles.
Joe Pez.
Bro. Could be just bro. Bro Ingles.
Bro Ingles. Joe Pez. No. I'm gonna stick with Jolo for now. Tell us,
I like
tweet at us, tell us in the comments what is the best
Yes.
abbreviation of the Joe Ingles Brook Lopez pick and roll. But the Jolo where Ingles, going to his left, throws a nice pocket pass, Brook catches it and just goes and thunderously slams, gets knocked in the head for the and one
Yes.
in one motion. That was a lot of fun. So yeah, he's just been remarkable this year. I'm just so excited for him to be doing what he's doing, to showing what he's showing, to be having this, career best season at the age of 34, almost 35. It will not make him any cheaper to retain for the Milwaukee Bucks this summer. It's going to be a fascinating negotiation, right? I thought, in beginning of the season, Al Horford extended for I think like 10 million a year for a couple of years. I thought, Brook, maybe he gets like 15 a year or something like that for a couple of years. Now I think you start getting into like, probably got to give him 3 years at this point. There's a years versus dollars sort of thing. Probably need to give him 3 years. And I don't know. Does he get $20 million a year? Right. I mean, he was basically this good when he got, whatever it was, 4 years, 52, I think, a few years ago. Obviously that was a lower cap. So it's sort of these things like, I don't think people expect him to be able to play forever, but for him to be looking this good, and knock on wood, hopefully, he stays healthy and continues doing this and leads the Bucks to another championship, right? And is a key piece of it. But it's put the Bucks in a very good problem to have, trying to figure out what you pay Brook Lopez. So yeah, he's just been so crucial. And again, on nights like tonight where they opt to rest Giannis with what they term knee soreness. Again, probably some of this looking ahead to this back-to-back when my prediction, I think Giannis plays in the back-to-back against Brooklyn and Boston. As we mentioned, I think the Boston game becomes suddenly extremely crucial, given that the Celtics probably have the easiest schedule of the three teams atop the East. And Philly, interestingly, now has dropped a couple games in a row. I think as we speak, they're resting Embiid against Jokic, and they're losing. So they seem to be dropping back. And even some conversation about is Philly like tanking for the 4 seed, which I think raises all sorts of interesting questions as well, because, I saw some people talking about like, well, geez, if Cleveland somehow steals ahead of Philly for the 3 seed, if you're the Bucks, would you rather have the 2 seed to face Cleveland potentially in the second round instead of the 1 seed? I don't know. At this point, like, just keep winning games, and I think you deal with whatever you kind of come up with.
What a turn of events that would be, Frank. If Philly drops to the 4, but the Bucks lose to Boston, and the fans are pissed, and then they end up getting a 2-3 with Cleveland anyway. Oh, it's crazy shit there.
Yeah, I mean, and to be clear, Philly is at 49, and if they lose tonight, they'll be at 49 and 26. The Cavs are 48 and 28. So still a couple losses up for Philly in that column. I'm not sure offhand what the tiebreaker is, but I think Philly is. I know Philly beat them at least a couple times recently, so I think Philly has the tiebreaker. They definitely are not behind in the tiebreaker head to head, but anyway, yeah, interesting. It's going to be an interesting close of the season, and again, especially the overlay of load management and not just load management to finish the season, but also just like trying to avoid like a last second injury to a last weekend of the season injury, right? Not just like, oh, I don't want to kind of wear guys down, but if you catch a 2-week injury, 3-week injury at this stage of the season, all of a sudden you're talking about guys missing playoff games, which is just the last thing that any of these teams want. So yeah, the long story short, though, Brook Lopez, shout out to Brook. God keep our Splash Mountain healthy and feeling good, because he's been incredible this year, and at least now, wood table, no signs of slowing down.
No, everyone certainly listening to this podcast loves Jingpez and everything they're doing out on the floor. So shout out to those two guys. As Frank said, drop your Joe Ingles, Brook Lopez combined names in the YouTube comments, and we'll come up with one. But Frank might be on the winner so far. I'm happy to concede and just come up with the absolute worst names I can possibly think of right now. I want to ask you about Jay Crowder returning, Goran Dragic making his Milwaukee debut, and one of your favorites, Wesley Matthews. So I got questions about those three guys in just a sec. I will just quickly on Khris Middleton as well. We've discussed him probably more than any other player on the podcast this year for obvious reasons. They've taken it incredibly slow for him. And I was watching the post-game press conference, and Eric asked Bud about where Khris is at and how is he looking. And Bud pointed to what you did with the free throw stuff. And it does seem like there's definitely no fear in attacking the basket and seeking out that contact. We saw that tonight. And Bud said that, and hey, look, why wouldn't Bud say this? But he did say that he thinks he's heading towards being better than he ever has. Now, we'll wait and see how that pans out over the next few weeks. But it's the one thing we know about Khris Middleton. Sometimes we talk about this team and do they take advantage of mismatches as much as they could. Khris has always done that. And there was a few times tonight with younger guys or guys that are a little bit smaller, and he was just working them, absolutely working them to either get an open jump shot or get to the free throw line. So it's fun to see Khris Middleton shooting the ball like that, even though he was 1 for 7 from the outside tonight. So we'll get to some of these other guys in just a second. Dragic, Crowder, and Wes Matthews. So we've been waiting for this for a little while, Frank. Goran Dragic. We didn't know whether the day was ever going to come. And I must admit, like, my first impression of Goran Dragic, and he didn't play a lot. He played the 9 minutes, didn't hit a shot. He had 3 assists there, though, and picked up a couple of quick fouls. But because we've watched Goran Dragic for so long, just seeing him in the Bucks uniform on the court looks strange. And I tell you what else, and maybe this is just me, but he looks so tiny out on the floor. And maybe that's because the Bucks had big lineups. But anyway, we didn't see a lot of him. So that's the extent of my Goran Dragic reaction. But it was nice to see him out on the floor. The Crowder and Matthews stuff is interesting. Matthews played 16 minutes, had a couple of good steals that came at pretty important parts of this game. Crowder only played the 12 minutes, his first game for a little while there. And we've discussed maybe those two guys are sort of battling, because I had a look at the minutes, total minutes, not per game, the total minutes from January 22nd to now, which is this run that the Bucks have been on, 25-4 in that stretch. Wesley Matthews is 10th for total minutes, and Jay Crowder is 11th for total minutes. And they're kind of battling here. So it's going to be fascinating to see how Bud works this over the last few weeks of the regular season and then obviously into the postseason. But any thoughts on some of those role players that we hadn't seen a lot of, certainly of late?
I mean, I think early in the season with Wes, we asked the question of how much of his, very deliberate return from injury and the way they were managing the business, how much of that was Bud saving him for the playoffs versus how much of that was a declaration of basically Bud saying, you know what, I don't think we're going to be as West dependent as we were last year when, of course, he ends up becoming a starter late in the season ahead of Grayson Allen, which obviously was a Bud decision. It was not driven by injury, and then ends up starting obviously throughout the playoffs and, got stretched further than everyone would have liked him to have to be stretched with Khris Middleton out. But at this point, honestly, I think with the limited role that he's had when the Bucks have been healthy, mostly DNPing when the Bucks have been fully healthy, and with the amount that they gave up for Jay Crowder, I have a very hard time seeing Jay Crowder, at this point lose out on minutes to Wes. I think fingers crossed the Bucks are healthy in the playoffs. But I think if that's the case, and I'm as big of a Wes Matthews fan probably as there come among, and I like to think I'm rational about it, but I do have obviously a soft spot. Wes Matthews also a Rocky Rococo fan, by the way. Nice. I just don't think he's probably going to play with any regularity unless there are injuries. And I think with Jay, the big differentiator is just at the end of the day, he can really play the 4 as more of a natural position for himself. And I think, Jay is in a way taking minutes from Wes, but I think he's also a guy that's going to take minutes from Bobby Portis, who we should call out. Bobby had, did what Bobby Portis should do in a game like this, where he's elevated to a starting spot, plays 31 minutes in Giannis's absence, puts up 21 points, 14 rebounds, hits 3 out of 7 from deep. did the kind of stuff that you want Bobby Portis to do on a night when you're shorthanded. But, is he going to play 20 minutes a game in the playoffs? Again, hey, we all love Bobby. Can't understate what he meant for the Bucks, especially in the finals and in Giannis's absence against the Atlanta Hawks. This is a guy that played huge minutes, made big shots in games 5 and 6 of an NBA Finals. So on the one hand, I think there's always the concerns about his defense, but we've seen them be able to play with him in that team concept at the highest level and succeed. But with Giannis and Brook and the level that Brook's playing at this year, and the fact that you have Jay now as another guy that can play the 4, I think it's very possible there's going to be scenarios where Bobby's minutes are severely limited. So yeah, I think the Crowder addition tonight, obviously kind of easing him back after the calf injury. PJ Tucker also had a calf injury, as people may recall, missed a bunch of time when he joined the Bucks a couple of years ago. So again, I always try to be wary of the direct comparisons, but good to see Jay back in the lineup here, and hopefully, with the Bucks, these muscle injuries, calves and hamstrings and quads and stuff, hopefully they're through the last of those types of injuries. But yeah, I thought Wes. Actually, I almost brought it up really early in the podcast, but he, as you pointed out, he had those 2 really big plays early in the fourth quarter when it was down to 4 points, 2 points, and Wes had a big steal, goes the other way, gets fouled, hits a couple free throws, and then I think on the subsequent possession, I don't think if I recall correctly, he basically kind of stripped it out of bounds off a piston to create a turnover, I think is what happened. My memory's not deceiving me. And so back-to-back plays where he, either gets a steal or creates a turnover, go the other way, Bucks get a bucket and kind of, basically begin to get that breathing room that obviously they'd had through kind of, the second quarter, parts of third quarter before Detroit kind of made it a game again. So, again, this is the depth thing, right? Just being able to bring a savvy veteran like Wes out on the floor. And he had a number of plays today where he was able to be a ball hawk and, get in, get strips, deflect the ball as the guy was driving to the basket, things like that. So, I think on the Dragic point, he finished off Dragic's first assist. Nice little pass in the dunker spot for Wes. I'm not sure if Wes made another shot tonight other than that one, but other than that nice pass, I would say Goran Dragic did not look like a guy that I'm going to have any expectations for. It's his first game for the Bucks. Obviously, he hasn't played in a few weeks. I thought the leg sleeve plus black shoes made him look especially slow and diminutive. I feel like in general, I'm not a big fan of black shoes on NBA players. I feel like lighter colored shoes make you look a little faster, more athletic. And when you're not fast or athletic, like Goran Dragic is, I feel like it really accentuates, looking like some middle-aged white guy at a run. The 2 shots he got up, the little floater that he kind of forced, did not look good. And he kind of forced a 3 as well that he missed off the front iron. So again, hopefully they stay healthy and Javon Carter continues to shoot the lights out from 3 and be a ball hawk on defense. And you get the playmaking of, Jrue, Giannis, Khris, and Joe, and you don't really need Goran Dragic to play you minutes, but we'll see. I'm sure we'll see a little bit more of Dragic over the course of the last week of the season. I'm sure we'll have at least one or 2 more games where it'll be more of a bench crew, just given some of the back-to-backs, and we'll see what kind of where they are in the standings to finish the season on that last weekend. But yeah, let's just say my low expectations for Goran Dragic's role were not in any way changed by his first game, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to show up at some point when they need him and potentially need to play a role. But certainly the design of this team is that he hopefully won't have to do that.
No question. Just a couple of quick ones to wrap this up. Grayson Allen didn't have the best shooting night, had some really good looks. He finished 2 for 7 from 3, but he did have a team high 7 assists. So I guess the big question is Giannis and Jrue holding the best playmaker back on the team in Grayson Allen? I guess that's a question that we'll have to look at.
Like Austin. Kane, were you?
Yeah, trust me. Yes, I've seen it. Don't worry about that.
The Jay Williams
How do you fit
trolling.
LeBron back in the lineup when you got Austin Reeves?
If you guys didn't see this, just Google it. Like Jay Williams and Austin Reeves and LeBron James, basically making it seem as though it's going to be hard to reintegrate LeBron James because Austin Reeves has been playing so well and he needs the ball in his hands. Anyway, thinking back fondly to Jay Williams greeting the Giannis extension 2 years ago by talking about Talon Horton-Tucker's preseason for the LA Lakers. Just, I don't know how Jay Williams keeps pulling a paycheck, but so it goes.
There's a couple of bad takes. We've all got bad takes, but that's a couple of particularly tough ones to look at there. One other thing from the press conference, just because I thought it was hilarious. At the end of the third quarter, Joe Ingles picked up a technical foul, and he was really not too happy with the official and a no call at the end of that quarter. Bud was kind of shoving him back to the bench, and Joe, I think, may have been uttering some colorful Australian language in Bud's direction. After the game, Bud was asked about it, and he said, well, he was shoved in the back. He said it was a no call in front of the whole world.
In front of an intimate group of friends and family at Little Caesars Arena. In this case, I don't know how.
I think Bud was talking about me, to be honest. He knew that I was watching in Australia, and he said he did that to an Australian. That is Australian. That is a criminal act almost by this official not calling that foul. So anyway, just a classic Bud line there in the post-game press conference. And then I did tweet a video of Khris Middleton getting a towel thrown at him pretty vigorously right in the face at the end of this game.
That? Who threw him the towel?
Well, Bucks social media put something up, and all the comments that suggested it might have been Joe Ingles were absolutely correct. It was Joe and Chris. Anyway, congratulations on your 34.9. So good stuff all around as far as I'm concerned.
I will say this. Friend of the pod, Justin Superbuck, had the comment that, of course, you don't throw water on the man that Justin has nicknamed Moist Jordan, which, first off, the use of the word moist, always questionable. But in Chris's case, he is one of them. I forgot how much we've joked about this on the podcast, but Chris is known to be a very sweaty NBA basketball player. I always think back, unfortunately, when he tore his hamstring years ago on a sweat puddle, hopefully not his own, but let's be honest, might have been his own. He works up a good lather. And so, yes, he's moist for that reason. So yeah, maybe Joe Ingles just saying, "Hey man, towel off. We don't need to wet you down any further before you get in the shower back here. Start to dry off a little bit." But yeah, good to see Khris Middleton obviously doing what we want to see Khris Middleton do and just looking comfortable, spending a lot of time on the ball tonight as well, right? I mean, this was not a game where he's just spotting up and posting up a little bit. He was really creating a lot of the offense in the half court and looked comfortable doing so. And of course, hey, yes, would have been nice to have more of that on Saturday against the Denver Nuggets. But if he just puts up 20 points tonight, do they win this game? I don't know. Like, they actually needed Khris Middleton to score 30 plus tonight probably to win this basketball game. So yeah, it was again a pretty timely night for him to step up against his former team. So yeah, shout out to Khris. He's up to 15.5 points, 4.4 rebounds, and 5 assists per game now on the season, which is obviously good to see. And since the All-Star break, 29 minutes per game, 18 points, 46% from the field, 35% from three, which almost surprises me. Like, it feels like he's had so many of these bad shooting games, but he's also had a few like 5 for 8 games, and 4 free throw attempts per game at 87%, 6.4 assists and 5.1 rebounds. I mean, again, that level of playmaking from a wing in only 29 minutes per game is pretty remarkable. And the fact that you've got 2 guys in both Khris and Joe Ingles that regularly can have this playmaking role is obviously big. And yeah, I mean, you can't say enough about what Joe has meant in sort of patching over some of the rough patches offensively, and Khris again doing what he's been doing. Good to see, and hopefully Jrue Holiday. By the way, there was a New York Times. I don't know that we've seen really like official confirmation of why Jrue missed this game. It was listed for personal reasons. There was a story in the New York Times today about a like a fraud scheme that targeted NBA players, and Jrue and Lauren, his wife, were mentioned as being victims, or it being similar to claims that they had made, being victims of some sort of fraud scheme. So again, I think we're waiting to hear. I don't know how much we're going to hear about this, but my first thought was like, I hope there's nothing wrong with his family or something going on there. We'll see if we get any confirmation of it, but again, it's curious timing here. Again, was it due to some legal reason? Again, hopefully he and his family are doing okay. And again, if obviously they've been the victim of some sort of fraud scheme, you can only hope that the perpetrators are brought to justice here. But apparently that may be happening. So we'll see. Hopefully Jrue is back soon, but obviously, probably not a bad time of year for him to get a day off, but certainly not the kind of circumstances that you'd want that to happen. So we'll see. I think still unclear if he's going to play on Wednesday. I don't know if Bud said anything post-game, Kane, that you heard. It sounded like that was still a bit of an open question, but hopefully he's back on Wednesday, because again, they're going to need him certainly for that back-to-back, and hopefully he can get back to playing basketball and doing what we know he's capable of there.
I tell you what is back Wednesday and every single weekday. That's the Locked On Game to Game podcast on your Locked On NBA feed. So make sure you check it out to get the news, stats, info, and analysis from across the NBA from all the local experts across the Locked On network. So check out the Locked On Game to Game podcast on your Locked On NBA feed. And then make sure you drop a comment and like and subscribe this fine show, because this was so I'm happy to say it. This was some quality stuff tonight from me and Frank. So if you enjoyed the show, help us out, subscribe, and remember, get your Joe Ingles, Brook Lopez combo names in on the YouTube comments, and hopefully someone is a little more creative than me. Probably wouldn't be hard to do. So
Splash Dingo. I don't know. There's no funny name for mountain in Australian isms.
Splingles. That sounds. You don't want to catch.
Splingles. Nasty case of Splingles.
Yeah, that's it. That's when the opposition is trying to stop the Joe Ingles, Brook Lopez pick and roll, and they just can't do anything about it. They've got Splingles and a serious case of Splingles.
I'm going to go ahead and say that's not winning. That's not winning the competition game.
Okay, well, that's a great way to finish this podcast. And one last, just really quick note: shout out to the Hop in Milwaukee. Unfortunately, ran off the tracks today, and not great for one of the great public transport services in the Milwaukee region. All right, we'll be back.
It's free, right? Is it still free?
It got me around. It got me to the third ward. I was maybe the only one using it, but I am a strong advocate.
I mean, if it's a free train, sometimes it's going to go off the rails, I mean, that's just, and again, if you get what you pay for, right? You get a lot more than you pay for, but shout out to the Hop. One of these days, Kane, we're going to grab a slice of Rocky Rococo's, jump on
from the Hop.
We're going to grab a slice of Rockies, jump on the Hop, and do a live pod from the Hop.
All right. We'll catch you all tomorrow.